Tonight, you'll wander ancient Greece with a hero so relaxed. He slept through the war, the glory, and about 300 years of history. You begin in the hush of a seaside village. It's dawn, but not the bold kind of dawn that throws light in your face. No, this one is gentle, like someone pulling back the curtain just enough to let a little lemon-colored glow spill onto the floor. The air smells faintly of salt and wet stone. A breeze from the Aegean brushes your cheek like a sleepy cat that isn't quite ready to be admired. Somewhere nearby, a bronze bell tinks lazily. It might be signaling the fishermen, or maybe it just likes to feel important before breakfast. You walk through a street lined with clay houses the color of baked bread. Their walls are cracked with time but sun-warmed and kind to lean on. You can hear the low clink of amphorae being set out for sale, figs being squished to test for ripeness, and a baby goat having a mild emotional crisis in the alley. You are in Ionia around the 5th century BCE, although time here is a little hazy like a poorly labeled spice jar. And you, friend, are on your way to a very boring epic. Oh, you probably won't make it through this day. But that's the point, isn't it? Before we drift too far, if you like soft journeys through dusty roads and unhurried legends, feel free to click that like button with the same energy as a philosopher stroking his beard, and drop a comment with your location and the local time. I like to imagine the quiet flicker of lamplight in 100 cities. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You are walking toward the Temple of Hypnos. Not the well-known one, but a smaller shrine tucked into a hillside like a drowsy cat curling into its own tail. The villagers say it belongs to a hero no one remembers. He came home, you see, centuries too late for the war he meant to fight. But more on that in a moment. Right now, you step carefully around a boy who is trying to catch a lizard with a piece of string and a plum pit. He looks up and says, "You going to the sleeper?" You nod. He shrugs. He's probably still asleep. He's not wrong. As you climb the slope, you feel the silence of the place. Not dead silence, just the kind that wraps around you, like a wool cloak that someone left in the sun too long. Somewhere above, you hear a dove giving her opinion on everything. Now, the myth, if you can call it that, goes something like this. Once there was a hero. He wasn't particularly famous, didn't slay any monsters that got recorded in poetry. But the town swore he was chosen by the gods, which, if we're honest, was a bit of a trend back then. Everyone knew someone whose cousin's neighbor's goat was touched by Apollo. This hero, let's call him the Los for convenience, was sent on a mission. Prophecy. He had to sleep, not die, just nap, for 300 years. And then he'd rise when the war began. Only he missed it entirely. Now his shrine is a place for weary fishermen to sit in the shade and mutter about taxes. Historians still debate whether this myth was ever tied to a real cult, or if it was just a well-preserved village joke. Some think the Los was invented to explain an old tomb someone forgot the name of. Others think it was a metaphor for political exile. Or maybe, just maybe, he was real and had a truly broken alarm clock. You reach the shrine. It's simple. A low stone structure with curling ivy and a tiny alcove. Inside, a worn statue reclines. He looks underwhelming, like he asked for heroic marble but got mildly handsome limestone. And yet, there's something about his expression. Not grand, not noble, just peaceful, as if sleeping through centuries of chaos wasn't such a bad deal. A basket of offerings sits nearby, dried lavender, a clay cup of old wine, a single sock, why not? And a cracked seashell with a faint etching, someone's initials maybe. People still come to see him, this anti-hero of stillness. You sit near the statue and watch as a breeze stirs the ivy. You could almost fall asleep right here. Maybe you already are. Let's say you stayed. The town doesn't seem to mind your presence. You've become another fixture in the slow rhythm of its days. Like the creaky olive press or the old woman who tells fortunes using olive pits and passive aggression. You wake each morning to the same view. Fields dotted with wild thyme, hills that look like they've just rolled over in their sleep, and the sea. Always the sea, with its gentle sighing like it's tired of being vast. Down in the village square, the potter is already shaping clay. His hands move like someone stirring thick soup. A goat with a limp guards the doorway, as if daring you to try stealing a jug. You hear the baker muttering to his dough again. He swears it rises better if you insult it first. You take a slow stroll through the town. It's the kind of place where every street is named after someone who once stubbed their toe in a memorable way. The locals give directions like, turn left where the cat got stuck in the amphora, then go past the fig tree that looks like my cousin, and of course everyone knows the los. He's still asleep, they say with a nod, as if that explains everything. A shepherd tells you that the los once appeared in someone's dream to suggest better fencing strategies. Another swears his cousin saw the statue blink, but only after too much fermented barley water. The story deepens. They say the gods gave the los the task of dreaming up peaceful solutions. Wars would happen anyway, of course, gods are dramatic like that, but maybe if the sleeper dreamed well enough, some small mercy would trickle through. A slow myth for a slow town. You climb the hill again. Remember the shrine? Of course you do. It's waiting. The ivy's thicker now, or maybe you just didn't notice how soft it looked last time. You press your hand to the stone. Warm. The statue's expression hasn't changed, but maybe your perception has. He looks a little smug now, like he knows something you don't. You lie beside the shrine, careful not to crush the sock offering. The wind brings the scent of old lemons and seaweed. Somewhere a lyre plays, not well but with great sincerity. Here's a historical truth to carry with you. In ancient Greece, sleep and prophecy were deeply entwined. People sought dreams for healing and direction. They'd sleep in temples, hoping to be visited by a god with practical advice or, at the very least, a metaphor they could interpret with the help of their local dream analyst/goat herder. And here's your obscure tidbit for the night. In some healing temples, priests whispered to the ears of sleeping visitors, guiding their dreams like gentle tour guides. Imagine that, drifting off while someone murmurs, "Now turn left into the cave of self-reflection." Historians still debate whether these dream rituals were spiritual therapy or elaborate placebo. But either way, the idea of sacred sleep clearly had staying power. especially in places like this. The sun is setting now. The villagers light lamps with little fanfare. A boy tosses a pebble into the shrine's offering basket and runs off, giggling. You think you hear the low sigh, but it's probably just the wind, or the goat. Either way, you feel the story wrapping around you like an old quilt that smells faintly of time and mystery. Close your eyes if you want, or stay with us a little longer. There's more to come. By now, you've settled into the rhythm of things. Your mornings begin with the familiar creak of shutters opening, the distant clatter of amphora lids being fumbled by someone who definitely overestimated their upper body strength, and the first sleepy yawn of the town's lone rooster, who still isn't entirely sure what his job is. You stretch, you breathe, you wander. The shrine to the Los is still there, of course. He hasn't gone anywhere. That's kind of his whole thing. But today, instead of going directly up the hill, you wander toward the eastern edge of the village, where the road turns to dust and the herbs grow wild and disorganized, like they've forgotten their plants and think they're confetti. There, you find an old man sitting on a rock. He's whittling a flute that may or may not produce any music, but you admire the effort. He gestures to the seat beside him without looking up. You hear the one about how the Los slept so long his beard grew into a grapevine? You haven't. He grins. Well, it didn't, but it should have. There's a pause while he chips at the wood. Somewhere in the hills, a sheep voices an opinion no one asked for. The old man continues. They say the Los wasn't just sleeping. He was listening. To what? Who knows? The earth? Maybe. Or the gods? Or himself? Or maybe he was just a champion of staying out of trouble. You nod slowly. You've known people like that. People who quietly disappear from the drama, offering only a shrug and a well-timed nap. The man points to the horizon, where you can just make out a line of old stones, crumbling columns from something that used to be important. They tried to build a temple there once, for the goddess of forgetfulness. Didn't catch on. Now that's your weird cultural tidbit for today. The Greeks did, in fact, revere Lethe, not just as a river in the underworld, but sometimes as a goddess in her own right. Forgetting was sacred too. Not everything has to be remembered, especially not that thing you said to your crush in 9th grade. Let it go. You rise and thank the old man. He nods and mutters something about figs being too self-important this year. Fair. You wander back toward the town. Remember the bakery? Today the dough is winning the argument. It's rising like it's auditioning for a play. The baker beams. You buy a hunk of warm bread and carry it in a cloth that smells faintly of lavender and laundry soap. A woman passing by tells you, the sleeper once saved a child from drowning. In a dream, you raise your eyebrows. It was a very persuasive dream, she insists. You don't argue. Dreams are weird like that. Back at the shrine, there's a new offering. A small carved turtle made of wood. Someone's left it beside the statue's foot, like a silent in-joke. You smile. You're starting to see how this town works. It's not about big stories. It's about the quiet gestures. Today's historical fact comes as you sit on the hill and listen to the wind in the trees. Ancient Greeks believed dreams could come from different sources, some divine, others just the result of bad lentils. Artemidorus, the dream interpreter, once wrote a whole book on the difference between prophetic visions and stomach-related hallucinations. Historians still debate whether the dreams people had in incubation temples were genuinely believed to be divine, or whether it was more of a spiritual placebo, a sacred version of take 2 herbs and sleep it off. Either way, the message is clear. Don't underestimate the power of lying down for a while. The sun dips lower. A dog barks once and then seems to reconsider. The goats shuffle in for the night. The los sleeps on unbothered. You lean against the shrine. The stone is cool now, but somehow familiar, like it remembers you, or maybe it's just being polite. You're not sure when you doze off, but you do. The breeze keeps watch. The dream, when it comes, is oddly detailed. You're in a bustling agora, Greek, sure, but cleaner than real life probably ever was. Stalls line the stone paths, each more absurd than the last. One offers heroic sandals that make you look more tragic. Another sells authentic replica goat tears. A man with a scroll as long as your leg tries to sell you an Oracle subscription plan. First prophecy's free, he says, then it's just 3 obols a month. You keep walking, and there, at the edge of the square, under an olive tree with questionable posture, is the los. Awake, sort of. His eyes are half open. The way someone looks when trying to understand new phone settings without their glasses. He nods at you. You're doing all right, he says. Better than I did. Then he hands you a cup of warm tea and says nothing else. You wake up to the faint smell of real tea. Someone's left a cup by the statue. It's still warm. No one is nearby. Back in the village, things carry on. A child runs by shouting something about a sacred turtle being kidnapped. 2 elders play a board game using olive pits and pointed size. A cat sits in a sunbeam with the expression of someone deeply disappointed in humanity. You overhear someone mutter, "The sleeper once dreamed a flood away." No one questions it. Later, in the shade near the old temple of Lethe, yes, you wandered back there. A priest in training tells you something interesting. The los, he says, squinting into the distance like all mysterious informants do, wasn't always a hero. He was a shepherd once. The gods chose him because he napped so well. You blink. Oh yes, he continues. He could sleep through thunder, through invasions, through those angry wasps in midsummer. Turns out, the gods may have admired this. Stillness, you see, was a virtue. Not everything noble had to be noisy. That's your historical fact. In some schools of ancient philosophy, especially among the Stoics, quiet endurance was ideal. The best life wasn't about glory. It was about remaining untouched by chaos. Your weird tidbit? There was once a minor Greek festival where everyone just stayed indoors and did nothing. It wasn't about worship, it was about rest. A literal holiday from being productive. Historians still debate whether this festival ever really existed or if it was just a poetic invention. But wouldn't that be nice? Back in town, the festival mood continues. People have begun leaving increasingly silly offerings at the shrine. A spoon, a tiny stitched pillow, a scroll with the words, you tried written on it. Someone even left a baked potato with a face drawn on it. No one claims it, but no one removes it either. It has somehow become part of the myth. You find yourself laughing gently, then yawning, then returning to your spot on the hill beneath the now familiar ivy. As you lie back, you hear a child whisper, "Shoo! Don't wake the hero. Don't worry, kid. You're not planning on it." This morning begins with the scent of something sweet, honey, maybe, or dates warmed on a clay plate left too close to the hearth. You open your eyes to birdsong, lazy and a little off-key, like they're practicing rather than performing. The sun filters through the fig leaves above, casting shifting patterns across your face like the gods doodling on a napkin. You stretch, and the hill beneath you stretches too, or so it feels. Stone warming beneath your back, a low hum of distant sheep, the whisper of sandals on dust as someone walks past with a basket of eggs precariously balanced on one hip. You've almost forgotten why you came here in the first place. Not that it matters. You're here now, and it's starting to seem like this place, this sleepy little town with its half-remembered myths and its overachieving bakery, is exactly where you're meant to be. Down in the square, a man is lecturing a group of bored chickens. They say the Los slept through an entire decade of war, he says, gesturing dramatically with a carrot. 10 years. Spears, ships, gods fighting over who wore what better. He missed all of it. A chicken pecks at his sandal. He takes it as applause. You take a seat on a nearby stone bench, one that's cracked and mossy and definitely wasn't designed for modern spinal alignment. A potter beside you hums as she shapes a lopsided jug. She doesn't look up as she says, "Some people say the Los wasn't a hero because he fought. He was a hero because he didn't." You nod. Or maybe you just blink very slowly. Either way, she seems to appreciate it. Today's historical fact floats in with the breeze. In Hesiod's Works and Days, there's a whole lecture about when to rest and when to labor. The Greeks had a calendar not just of festivals, but of prescribed lucky and unlucky days, specific days when it was best to do nothing at all. Yes, there were sanctioned nap days. You wonder if the Los marked them on his wall. Or maybe he didn't bother. Every day was nap day when your mythological resume included exemplary slumberer. Over near the old well, remember that? The one covered in faded paint and carved names. You overhear two youths speculating that the Los didn't actually miss the war. He just pretended to sleep. One says, eyebrows wiggling with intrigue, "It was performance art." The other shrugs. Well, if that's true, he deserves an Oscar. Or whatever the Greek version of that is. You resist the urge to offer a laurel wreath. There's a light drizzle in the afternoon. Not enough to chase people indoors. Just enough to make the air smell of wet stone and possibility. The shrine glistens slightly. Someone's replaced the potato offering with a slightly larger potato. You don't ask questions. And here's your weird cultural tidbit. Some mystery cults in ancient Greece believed that certain types of sleep could open doorways to divine communication, but only if you fasted beforehand and slept in the right direction. West was ideal. South was risky. North? Too drafty. Historians still debate whether these instructions were more spiritual or just ancient sleeping tips passed down by overbearing relatives. By nightfall, the stars are out. They seem particularly smug tonight. You sit beside the ivy again, the same one from your first night. It's grown, or you've shrunk. Hard to tell. The Los once slept so well he healed a mountain. Someone whispers nearby. Sure, why not? You drift, slowly, into dreams of ships never launched, wars never fought, and calendars filled with restful blankness. A myth, it turns out, doesn't need action. Sometimes, all it needs is stillness. It's market day again, though no one seems entirely sure why. There are more stalls than usual, more goats trying to be subtle in their plotting, and at least one man loudly selling certified heroic air. You pass him. He tries to hand you a sealed jar. Just 1 drachma. He grins. Breathed by someone adjacent to greatness. You decline politely. The bakery's especially lively today. A new creation has appeared. A circular flatbread shaped vaguely like a sleeping man. The label reads, "The Los loaf may cause drowsiness." You buy one. It's surprisingly chewy. Possibly a choking hazard. Definitely a statement. As you munch thoughtfully, you overhear a debate between 2 scholars under the olive tree. It wasn't 300 years. One insists, flipping through a scroll. It was only 147. The rest was just a metaphor. Metaphor for what? The other scoffs. Oversleeping is the metaphor. You move on before they drag you into it. Today's historical fact sneaks in between bites of flatbread. In some versions of myth, especially the Orphic traditions, heroes didn't just go on adventures. They also underwent long periods of sleep or stillness as part of their journey. Time wasn't a straight line. It was something you could pause, skip, or even sleep through if you had the right kind of soul. Down by the old road, you find a boy playing with small clay figurines. They look like warriors, but they're all lying down. You raise an eyebrow. They're sleeping through the battle, he says with a grin. Very advanced tactics. You nod approvingly. Nearby, an elder tells you the Los once dreamed so deeply he emerged with new laws for the town. That's how we got the no loud pots before sunrise rule, she says solemnly. And now your cultural tidbit. The ancient Greeks had a word, oneirocritica, which refers to the interpretation of dreams. They took it so seriously that professional dream interpreters had job security longer than most monarchs. Some even had branded slogans. Sleep with me, dream like the gods. Historians still debate whether these interpreters actually believed in what they did, or if it was just the world's earliest form of personalized content monetization. You wander past the fields, where the farmers work slowly. One leans on his rake and says, "You know, I think the Los might still be asleep. That statue? It's just his body. He's in there, listening." You pause. He's smiling, but not joking. Later, by the stream, you find a rock that's warm from the sun and perfectly shaped for leaning. You close your eyes, not to nap, just to listen. Wind through the reeds, the distant clink of amphora lids, someone arguing very gently with a sheep. The world doesn't need you to hurry. You've got time. And the Los? He's still sleeping. Or watching. or quietly reminding everyone that rest is resistance. That peace is not the absence of war. It's the presence of long, unbothered naps. You smile and rest. It's early morning again, and the light has that pale, hazy glow that only happens when the clouds are pretending to be sheep. And that's your weird tidbit. The sacred snakes were part of the deal. Asclepian snakes, non-venomous and reportedly very polite, were kept in temple dormitories to symbolically heal the sleeping patients. You were expected not to scream if one curled up near your feet. Historians still debate whether the snakes were symbolic messengers or just unpaid hospital staff. A boy runs past you wearing a makeshift toga and a crown made of cheese. "I am Thalos," he shouts, before tripping over a sandal and dissolving into giggles. You sit beside the statue again. Someone's put sunglasses on it today. There's also a lyre gently propped against one leg, as if the los might wake at any moment to perform a sleepy ballad. And maybe he would. You begin to notice just how many people here have built their lives around this quiet myth. Vendors selling Thalos-approved bedding, priests blessing pillows, local lawmakers citing the Book of Slumbers when drafting curfew laws. A farmer passes by pulling a small cart of olives. "The hero of rest," he mutters reverently. "We could use him in Athens." You don't know whether he's joking, but you do know you feel oddly protected here. As if the los himself is keeping watch, though watch might be too active a word. Let's say, keeping presence. Somewhere overhead, a dove sneezes. You decide not to unpack the symbolism. Instead, you lean against the wall of the shrine, where the sun is warm and steady. Someone hums nearby. Maybe it's the potter from before. Maybe it's just the breeze getting musical again. You close your eyes. The festival of slumber is beginning. And frankly, you're more than ready to participate. This morning, you're woken not by birdsong, or the gentle murmurs of the town, or even the scent of something suspiciously overcooked. No, today, you're roused by a grand parade of silence. Dozens of people walking in solemn procession, carrying pillows. They file past in slow motion, their steps muffled by layers of soft fabric strapped to their feet. Each one carries a sleeping object. A kitten in a basket, a loaf of bread in a tiny bed, a scroll with eyes drawn on it. This, you realize, is the final ritual of the festival of slumber, the day of communal yawning. At the center of it all is the high priest of the los, a tall man with robes too long for his legs and a crown made of sleep-matted feathers. He stops in the middle of the square and begins to chant, "By the dreams of our ancestors, by the naps of our goats, by the midnight snacks of the divine, may rest be upon us." A collective yawn ripples through the crowd. Someone nearby actually applauds. Slowly, sleepily, you are handed a scroll by a local child. It reads, "Congratulations. You are now a certified apprentice of sloth." You don't fight it. Today's historical fact tucks itself into your mind like a warm blanket. The ancient Greeks had many myths about those who withdrew from war, not out of cowardice, but out of a deeper loyalty to other values. The philosopher Diogenes, for instance, famously told Alexander the Great to move out of his sunlight, choosing comfort over conquest. And your weird cultural tidbit? In some obscure village cults, certain sacrifices involved not the spilling of blood, but the offering of rest. A family would dedicate a full day to doing absolutely nothing in honor of a local spirit who hated noise. No chores, no arguments, no pottery, just pure, blessed idleness. Historians still debate whether these traditions were sincere religious acts or well-disguised excuses to skip work. Later, the festival's final contest begins. The Great Blanket Race. You watch as teams of two try to drag each other in wrapped-up blankets across a field without waking the passenger. One team wins after managing to lull their runner back to sleep mid-race. Cheers erupt. Quietly, of course. Back in the quiet part of town, you find a new sign hanging beside the bakery. Official heroic hours. 10 a.m. to 3 p.m., with nap breaks at 11 and 2. You admire the work ethic. Someone sits beside you on a stone step. It's the old woman who mentioned the dream laws earlier. She hands you a biscuit and says, "You know, some say the Los woke up once." You raise an eyebrow. "Oh yes," she nods. Stood right up. Yawned so wide that the sky hiccuped. Then he saw the news and decided to go back to bed. You nibble the biscuit. Tastes like honey and skepticism. As the sun begins to dip below the hill, the town exhales. Everyone seems a little sleepier, a little more willing to surrender to twilight. The statue of the Los has been decorated with feathers and lavender sprigs. Someone's propped a tiny book against its foot. The title? How to Do Nothing and Still Be Remembered. You smile, and for the first time you start to wonder if maybe the Los didn't miss the war at all. Maybe he dodged it. Maybe he looked at the chaos, the clanging armor, the egos the size of mountaintops, and said, "Not today, not for me." Maybe peace was the real quest, and rest the real triumph. You close your eyes again, because the hero sleeps still. And tonight, so do you. You're not entirely sure when you fell asleep, but it seems the town rearranged itself while you were dreaming. Again. The statue of the Los now has a scarf. A pigeon is wearing a tiny laurel wreath. And someone has chalked a rather ambitious mural onto the plaza stones, depicting the Los riding a turtle into the sunset, clutching a cup of herbal tea. You stretch, blink, and catch the scent of something new in the air. Not bread, not olives, not even incense. Mint. You follow your nose through a winding alley that smells like history and maybe a little mildew. At the end of it, a door opens before you even knock. Inside is a dim room filled with scrolls and cushions. A very elderly man, whose eyebrows are each older than most small countries, waves you in. "Come in," he rasps. "I heard you were curious about the sleeper." "I am," you say, though your voice comes out as more of a whisper. Something about the air here demands reverence. Or maybe it's just all the dust. He gestures toward a scroll case. "We don't read them here. We listen. Sit." So you do. And then you listen. A recording begins. Not a modern one, of course, but the oral kind, rhythmic, repeating, careful. You hear an ancient voice describe the Los as he once was. Tall, quiet, observant, fond of cool shade and lazy animals. Not a fighter, not a builder, but someone who simply noticed things. He could stand in one place for hours, the voice says, just watching how the light moved across a pot of lentils. Your major historical fact for this part of the journey whispers in your mind like the narrator of the scroll. Some ancient Greek philosophers, especially those of the Epicurean persuasion, truly believed in the pursuit of peace, rest, and sensory pleasure. Not gluttony or laziness, but a quietude that allowed the soul to breathe. Epicurus himself kept a garden where he and his followers lived simply, with bread, cheese, and philosophy. Delos, it seems, might have been a fan. As the story goes on, the old man nods off in his chair. You tiptoe out respectfully. Outside, a cat follows you. You don't remember seeing it before. It has the quiet authority of someone who knows where you're headed better than you do. Back in the plaza, someone is holding a Delos symposium. It's 3 people sitting in a circle, trying to outdo each other with the laziest metaphors. One says, he was like a log, but philosophical. Another counters, no, more like a shadow that never paid rent. The third simply sighs and says, he was a soft refusal. You applaud softly. Your obscure cultural tidbit? In some lesser-known Hellenistic towns, people believed that inspiration came in sleep. Not dreams specifically, but the act of sleeping itself. So poets were expected to nap extensively before reciting their work. The more rested, the more lyrical. Historians still debate whether this resulted in better poetry or just a rise in afternoon snoring. You sit again at your now familiar bench by the bakery. Someone's left you a plum and a folded note. The note reads, you are walking the path of the Los. No swords, no monsters, just moments. That's the whole journey. You look around. No one's watching, but someone is definitely noticing. You're walking again, though now you're not entirely sure whether it's a memory or a dream or one of those between worlds where everything smells faintly of time. The hills rise ahead, soft and sleepy, like someone forgot to finish painting them. You follow a winding path toward a ruin, a temple, maybe, or a very ambitious picnic area. There's a tablet half buried in the grass. You brush it off. It reads, here he might have slept, or not. We're honestly not sure. Classic ancient humility. As you sit on a nearby stone, surprisingly ergonomic, a breeze moves through the olive trees with the hush of 1,000 lullabies. You begin to notice things you hadn't before. The way sunlight pools on certain stones. The very slow crawl of a beetle hauling a breadcrumb. The soft murmur of something underground. Water, perhaps, or the memory of footsteps. This is when the scholar finds you. A younger woman with arms full of scrolls, chalk dust on her elbow, and a habit of narrating her own thoughts out loud. Found the sleeping site again. Excellent. Or, at least a version of it. Possibly misattributed. I don't trust the earlier cartographer. He drew a sheep with arms. She peers at you. Are you here for the lecture? You nod. Might as well. You're already sitting. She sets down her scrolls. So, Delos. Not his real name, obviously. Or maybe it was. Historians still debate whether he even existed, or whether he was a sort of collective coping mechanism for a generation that just really needed a nap. She gestures to the hilltop. The sleep site is here because it's quiet, but it also happens to be where 5 different footpaths intersect. Some believe he chose this spot not to hide from the world, but to feel it pass around him, to stay still in the stream rather than stepping out of it. You blink slowly. That sounds oddly comforting. Your major historical fact floats down like olive pollen. In ancient Greek geography, crossroads weren't just places of travel. They were often sacred, liminal spaces. Shrines were built there to honor Hecate, goddess of transitions and thresholds. They were where people left offerings, told secrets, or sat very still waiting for signs. And your obscure tidbit? Certain sleepy towns in Boeotia believed that a person could gain divine insight by doing absolutely nothing at a crossroad for 3 days. No talking, no eating, just existing. They called it threshold dreaming. You ask the scholar if the Los was one of them. She smiles. We don't know, but his story insists on stillness. And sometimes, that's all the answer you need. The two of you sit in quiet for a while. Then she packs up her scrolls, offers you a fig, and wanders down the path, muttering about mythical bed frames and the politics of bedtime. You stay, longer than you meant to, until the stars start blinking into view like lazy candles in the sky. And the world feels quieter than ever, because here, the hero sleeps still. And you're starting to understand why. The moon tonight is half asleep, a soft crescent, curled like a yawn you haven't finished. You sit at the edge of the temple ruins, if temple is even the right word for a few sleepy columns and a stone that looks suspiciously like a fallen couch. You feel it again. This sense that you're not just visiting Thalos's world, you're being slowly absorbed into it. You stretch your legs, and the grass beneath you sighs approvingly. Somewhere nearby, an owl hoots, but not in an urgent way. More like a librarian asking if you'd mind keeping the philosophical muttering down to a gentle whisper. A soft rustling behind you draws your attention. You turn, slowly, because haste has been out of style since Section 3, and find a figure approaching. They're wearing a tunic and a look that says, I carry knowledge but also snacks. Promising. I bring the record of Thalos's missing years, the figure says. Or, as we call it, the Great Nap. They sit beside you and unroll a scroll covered in pale brown ink. Some of it is smudged. One corner appears to have been chewed by a goat. During the 300 years of his rest, the reader begins, the Los was not dead, nor fully asleep. He was extremely unavailable. You raise an eyebrow. Yes, they nod. Unavailable to time, to politics, to conversation. He existed in what some call a sacred pause, a waiting between epochs. The scroll goes on to detail how the world changed in his absence. Empires rose, languages evolved, sandals got marginally more ergonomic. And yet, here in his hillside hollow, the Los remained. His breath as steady as a metronome set to contemplative. Here's your major historical fact for this chapter. Ancient Greek timekeeping wasn't just linear. Some thinkers believed in kairos, a kind of sacred or opportune moment outside of clock time. Not the hours ticking by, but the right moment, the meaningful moment. The Los, it seems, lived entirely in kairos. The scroll also records something stranger, a list of dreams the Los supposedly had. One about a garden made of salt, another about a man made of bees, a third about waking up in a future where everyone talked with their hands and worshipped hot drinks in paper cups. Probably symbolic, the reader says, chewing thoughtfully on a dried fig. Your obscure tidbit? In parts of ancient Arcadia, dreams were seen as having mass, actual weight. It was believed that particularly heavy dreams could bend time around the sleeper. Some people even slept on special clay tiles to lighten their dreams and avoid accidentally slipping into tomorrow. Do you think the Los dreamed too heavily? You ask. The scroll reader shrugs. Or maybe the world just kept moving too fast. Historians still debate whether Thalos' sleep was a punishment, a miracle, or simply an elaborate way of opting out. The reader finishes their fig, ties up the scroll, and pats the stone beside you. Take your time, they say. He certainly did. They disappear back into the olive trees, one step at a time. You lie back on the stone and look at the stars. The owl hoots again, possibly in agreement. The next morning, or at least what passes for morning in this gently warped pocket of myth, you find yourself back at the agora. But it's quieter now. Fewer people. Fewer sandals squeaking on stone. Even the loaves of bread seem slightly less enthusiastic. You pass by the mural of the Los. Someone has updated it overnight. Now he's wearing a hat. Not a Greek one, just a hat. You tilt your head. It suits him. Near the edge of the square, a little amphitheater has been set up. A very earnest young actor is performing the tragedy of the hero who missed his own war. You take a seat. He's playing every role himself, which includes the Los mostly lying down, the general yelling into the void, a chorus of confused goats. Time itself, represented by sand slowly spilling from a shoe. The performance is oddly moving. There's a moment when Thalos' friend, who had trained with him for years, goes off to war without him and whispers, "I'll tell them you were resting your eyes." You feel that one. A major historical fact strolls through the scene, wearing a cloak of melancholy. During the actual Trojan War, if it happened at all, historians still debate that. Countless figures from lesser-known Greek towns never made it to the battlefield. Whether due to political delays, superstition, illness, or divine detour, many warriors simply didn't arrive. Their stories were often folded into myth or forgotten entirely. Some, like the Los, were given strange fates to justify their absence. Others were just never mentioned again. The actor, as chorus laments, "What is a hero who never swings his sword? A footnote? A bedtime story? A punchline?" And then, as the Los, he yawns elaborately and lies down again. The performance ends with polite, sleepy applause. A few coins clink into a basket labeled, "For dramatic sand." You wander toward the edge of town, where the land begins to rise into hills again. A shepherd waves at you lazily. His flock is lounging, not grazing, not by ing, just reclining in the grass like a woolly salon. Did you hear about the Los? He asks. They say he woke up once, briefly, to comment on the weather. You raise your eyebrows, said it was still too loud, and went right back down. You're not sure if he's joking. You're not sure if anyone here ever is. Your obscure cultural tidbit arrives via a passing flute player who hums a tune you've never heard, but somehow know the words to. In a few remote villages in Epirus, people believed that lullabies could only be sung backwards during festivals, not in reverse, but with the last verse sung first, then the middle, then the beginning. This was meant to gently untangle time and let sleep fall into the listener like dusk into the sea. Tonight, that same lullaby echoes in your ears. Though no one's singing it, you follow the old path back to the hillside. You sit by the temple, again. You lie on the same stone, again. Only this time, you dream with intent. You dream in slow motion. You dream like someone who has nowhere to be. And maybe, just maybe, the Los is dreaming with you. You wake, if one can call this gentle drifting waking, to a breeze that smells faintly of time, parchment, and unresolved philosophical questions. The light is golden, the kind that makes even pebbles look profound. A cicada clicks somewhere nearby, sounding suspiciously like it's applauding your commitment to taking things very slowly. You rise from the stone with the gravitas of a minor oracle emerging from a nap, and begin your walk down the hill again. But this time, you don't take the main path. This time, you follow a side trail, half overgrown, lined with soft moss and the occasional abandoned sandal. At the base of the path, tucked behind a fig tree that clearly doesn't care who sees its roots, you discover something new. An old stone doorway carved directly into the hillside. It bears a single word in faded Greek, hypomnema, a memory place. Inside, it's dim and cool. The air smells of damp limestone and forgotten names. Shelves carved from the living rock line the walls, and they're filled with small clay tokens, each one etched with a name and a single word. Courage, delay, almost, yes. A figure sits at a low desk, hunched over a tablet. They look up slowly, and you notice their eyes shimmer with that same not-quite-here light you saw on Thalos's mural. You've come for the records, they say, without any surprise. I didn't know there were records. There always are, they reply. Even for those who sleep. They gesture to a nearby shelf labeled possibly happened. You feel, instinctively, that this is where the Los lives now, not in history, not in fiction, but in that quiet little in-between drawer. The record keeper tells you that when the Los finally awoke, after 300 years of absolutely glorious unconsciousness, he didn't storm into town with trumpets or reclaim lost glories. No, he walked quietly into the agora, sat down on a worn bench, and asked if the figs were still good. They were. Here's your major historical fact. In ancient Greece, some versions of the myth of Epimenides of Crete describe him sleeping in a cave for nearly 57 years and emerging not aged, but somehow wiser, almost shimmering with something timeless. His long nap made him not less of a thinker, but more. Scholars still debate whether Epimenides was a real person, a composite, or just a clever metaphor for strategic avoidance. You must understand, the record keeper says, brushing dust from a small disc labeled the Los, minor hero, major sleeper. In Greek myth, the absence of action is often more meaningful than the action itself. They hold up one of the clay tokens and show you the inscription. No, just that. No battle, no glory, no speech. Just a refusal. Or perhaps a pause. Your obscure tidbit? Some Hellenistic dream interpreters believed that dreaming of standing still, while others rushed past, meant your soul was resisting the will of the cosmos, and that this resistance was noble. They called it karteria, the virtue of waiting well. You thank the keeper, who nods with the weary satisfaction of someone who's cataloged centuries of almost events. Before you leave, they press a small clay piece into your palm. It says, "Not yet." You tuck it into your tunic. Back outside, the sun is tilting toward evening, and everything, the grass, the hills, even the light, seems to be exhaling. You follow the path back to the quiet temple. This time, though, you pause before lying down. You turn east, toward the distant sea, and whisper, "What did you miss, the Los?" The wind answers, "Maybe. Or maybe it's just your own breath. It's dark now. The good kind of dark. The kind that feels like a soft wool blanket has been draped over the sky." You sit again beside the stone that has become your unofficial pillow, staring up into constellations that don't seem entirely committed to their shapes. Tonight, you don't try to follow the story. Tonight, the story follows you. The Los is no longer a man or a name or even a myth. He's a presence, a question left half-asked. What happens when the hero sleeps through the war? What kind of tale gets told when the middle is just a long silence? You see it now. His legacy was never about action. It was about the audacity to not act. In a world driven by feuds and fates and frantic prophecies, the Los took the radical step of simply laying down, and the world kept spinning. Here's your final major historical fact of the series. In many ancient Greek philosophies, especially the later, slower Stoics, inaction wasn't cowardice. It was mastery. To choose stillness in a storm, that was divine. One surviving text describes a ritual honoring the quiet ones, figures who resisted chaos not with swords, but with silence. The Los is listed somewhere in the margins. Tonight's obscure tidbit? In rural Delos, there was once a festival where no one was allowed to speak above a whisper for 3 days. Not even the goats. It was meant to honor the gods of pause, breath, and patience. Participants reported high rates of clarity and goat confusion. You close your eyes. Around you, the hills of myth begin to fade. The olive trees fold into shadows. The agora dissolves into twilight. Remember the little street with the leaning fig vendor? You see it again now, quiet and bare, but still holding the shape of the stories it once carried. The mural of the Los remains, and the hat still suits him. You feel something press gently against your chest. The clay token. You hold it up one more time and read the words again. not yet, a fine ending, or a beginning, but for now just not yet. You lie back now, deeper into the earth-warmed stone, and the story stretches gently toward its final page. No battles, no fanfare, just the faint rustle of wind through dry leaves, and the occasional owl muttering what sounds like ancient punctuation. Tonight, you return, not to the caves or the Acropolis or the goat-haunted roads, but to the in-between places, to the thresholds of stories, to the part that comes just after someone says, "Once upon a time," and just before anything actually happens. It's here that the Los rests. Still, you think, perhaps, of the people who passed by his cave across those 300 years. A shepherd with a limp, a philosopher with half a sandal, a little girl chasing a chicken uphill. None of them knew he was in there, snoring gently through centuries, resisting the weight of destiny with each peaceful exhale. Somewhere, someone must have tried to wake him. A cousin, maybe, or a particularly ambitious oracle. Perhaps they shook his shoulder, dropped a cold fig on his cheek, or even shouted, "You're missing everything." But the Los never stirred, and maybe that was the point. Here, at the end of our story, comes your final major historical note. Some versions of the Rip Van Winkle motif existed in Greco-Roman folklore centuries before Washington Irving. The idea of long sleep as a form of quiet resistance, or divine pause, was older than Rome itself. In Greek myth, these dreamers weren't fools. They were thresholds in human form. Your obscure tidbit? Some temples had dedicated napping chambers where pilgrims could sleep in hopes of receiving divine dreams. The best ones? Allegedly just a slow-motion replay of your daily routine, but in softer lighting. Scholars still debate whether any of these tales had real-world origin, or were simply society's gentle way of saying, some folks just need a break. And that's it. Really. The Los doesn't wake to applause. He doesn't defeat a sea monster. He doesn't reclaim a kingdom or wrestle Zeus. He simply blinks at the light, stretches his limbs, and wanders into the world that no longer remembers his name. And somehow, that's enough. His legacy isn't etched into marble. It's not chanted by poets. It's not carved onto monuments by the unpaid interns of history. No, his story lives here, in a quiet voice told on a quiet night, in a story that doesn't rush to be anything more than what it is. Slow, soft, and strangely warm. And now, dear listener, let everything settle. The myths have quieted. The hills have gone still. The fig vendor has finally packed up, and the last cicada hums a lullaby so gentle it barely stirs the olive branches. Let your shoulders sink, just a bit deeper. Feel the weight of blankets, of time, of old stories and mist wars gently curling around you. Out in the distance, beyond myth and marble, the stars are beginning their slow choreography. You don't have to watch. They'll keep dancing, whether you see them or not. Like most beautiful things, your breath is soft, your limbs loose. You've traveled through temples and dreams and slow-simmered fables. You've listened to goats. You've admired murals. You've held a token that simply said, "Not yet." And maybe that's what tonight is. A pause. A resistance. a sacred little moment of stillness in a world that always wants to rush to the next page. But there's no next page tonight, just this one, this quiet, unhurried breath. Let your mind drift, like Thalos's did, into that strange and lovely gap between then and now, between what happened and what might have, between stories that want to be told and those content to simply be felt. Sleep well, quiet traveler. You didn't miss the war. You missed the noise. And wasn't that the point?